I'm an environmentalist first. I love nature. If you know anything about me, you'll know how much I love, just the creation around us. And I want it to be held together for future generations to enjoy. And if I make less money because of those practices, then so be it. You know, uh, I'm not going to lose any sleep over making uh, the best decision I think I can for the soil and the land.
Welcome to episode whatever it is, we don't know anymore, of the Denton Farms podcast. To this week where are we? We're in semi truck.
Yeah, in a semi.
It's the middle of harvest, and so we have had a hard time actually recording podcasts. So that is why we are here sitting in the semi trying to record a podcast right now.
Not as easy as if you have earphones on and you can hear your own voice.
Yeah. So if you can't see us in the frame entirely, it's because we're in a semi. There's not a ton of room in here. Yeah. So we're sitting here. They're harvesting soybeans right now. We're waiting for a load. And Blake and just Blake today is out cover cropping, right?
That's right. Blake's out today. Zach's been cover cropping with him, but we need a little extra trucking today because we're going to the elevator with some of the loads. So.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about cover cropping. It's kind of a hot button topic. A lot of people out there are convinced that no one who conventionally farms cover crops and that we just till every piece of dirt over until it's black in the face, which is not true. I'd say probably 60 to 75% of the farms I've driven past since harvest has begun have been cover cropped, which is a very large percentage of fields.
It is.
So, and that's not a new thing either. I don't want people to come away from this thinking like cover cropping's been around for
years,
a long time. The no-till and cover crop regen agriculture is nothing new. There's just a lot of people on the internet talking about it right now.
It's a niche, popular subject.
Yes, but it's also something that lots of people that I've met have been practicing for sometimes 30 plus years.
Yeah, so this farm has. We haven't just broadly cover cropped everything like we do now, but we've been using the practice on fields that we felt like were in the danger zone of maybe erosion. So we would swing them into a cover crop for the fall and, to eliminate the erosion happening during the course of the winter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think... Sorry, Neil's rolling up his window if you're not watching the podcast and just listening.
Yeah, we got a tractor coming alongside of us here to dump a load.
So, yeah, I just, it's one of those things that really frustrates me because I post a lot of things on the internet in regards to conventional agriculture, industrial ag, like those things. And I think the internet is convinced that cover cropping is this new thing that no one knows about.
Yeah, I think and that's the way a lot of these different corporations that are paying for carbon credits are kind of putting it off like they're asking they're wanting to pay farmers to make a practice change. And there's a lot of farmers that are already cover cropping. And so they cannot change a practice that they're already doing. So in turn, they get you signed into a contract, they get your data, and then at the end they tell you, oh, we can't pay you because you've been consistently doing that practice. It's not a practice change. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem I see, with those corporations that are using that carbon credit system to profit off of from the government, mm-hmm. or private corporations. So I don't know. I don't think there's been a great program yet for the farmer to use to garner a revenue off of. It's just if you can save the soil on your farm by cover cropping, you're benefiting, in my opinion.
And that's why you do it, right?
And that's why we do it, yeah.
There is a lot of government chit-chat going on around about it, and a lot of people saying we need to legislate it and all these different things. But in reality, most people who cover crop are doing it because it's a good practice to do. It's not like oh man, like we're climate change crazies that are just going, oh, we have to do it, we have to do it to save the world. It's like, no, it's just incredibly practical.
Yeah, it does. It just provides you a service of having roots in your soil during the fallow times of the year when when there's not a lot growing naturally out there. There is some winter annuals that'll come, but they're not enough to hold the soil down like a crop that's planted by a planter.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have that planted crop and, those big rains come and you've got a rooted crop in the ground, then you're never 100% protected from erosion, but it does a lot better job of holding your soil in place than, getting a 2-inch rain or a 5-inch rain without it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and it's also adding nutrients back into the soil.
it is.
We're at the point where we're studying what's being put back in when you cover crops. So not only are you looking at a cover crop as, oh, like this is just holding the soil together with its root structure, but it's also helping prepare that crop for spring that you're going to plant. You're putting, you probably know better than I do, like what's rye usually put back into the soil after you
Well,
cover crop it?
the great thing about rye is if it's after a grass crop like corn, for instance, if you have leftover nitrogen out there, the rye is going to scavenge that nitrogen, and then when it's terminated, the next season, it'll return that nitrogen in organic form to your crop that you currently have growing. And soybeans don't like synthetic nitrogen that much, but they love organic nitrogen. And then corn can use organic. Corn loves all nitrogen. it's it's a nitrogen hog, but it really efficiently uses organic nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's beneficial to both crops. And, I think there is a benefit that we're just now learning about that is a biological benefit of like organisms and such being, in that crop that cover crop that's growing in the field. You have active soil organisms working because of that crop growing. So
Mm-hmm.
not only do we have erosion benefits, we have benefits for the scavenging of nutrients and then returning them to the soil in the rotting organic form and then we have the biological benefits of it. So there is several different benefits of the cover crop system.
Mm-hmm.
There's challenges too, but
Yeah, why don't people cover crop?
I think there's a lot of reasons. It's not suited for every area. There's certain areas that the soils remain uh, very wet in um, and struggle to dry out with cover crops. We're in a more sandy soil here, so it fits our region really well. We have sandy soils. We're hot here a lot of times, like what it's 75 today in middle of November here. So, in our area fits really good, like maybe in Minnesota where they're constantly fighting the mud and they don't get a lot of sun and they don't get a lot of heat. It's probably not a great system. Um, that's why not everybody can. I know, like there's certain people that say everybody can cover crop. Well, it doesn't work as good in some places as it does here. So
Yeah, I mean, I've got a buddy who would swear by cover cropping every single one of his fields. If you asked him, he's a good farmer, and he's thinking super far ahead. But the end of the year comes, and we live in an area where sometimes if you don't have your entire corn crop out by the middle of October, end of October, you're getting snow within the next week or two. And so he's got to get that crop out of the ground if he wants to survive to farm another year. And so for him, he gets to the end of his season. He's like, okay, I've got corn out of the ground. I've got soybeans out of the ground. Now I want to go cover crop. Oh, it snows the next day and it's cold for the rest of the year. It's like he could plant that cover crop, but it's not going to do anything till spring, if at all.
yeah,
You know, we it's not that he doesn't want to do it, and it's not a practice that he hates, but it's one of those things like it's just too cold where he lives. He either needs more labor to get it in, or he needs to somehow change the seasons, which he can't. And so I think a lot of people approach the conversation so untactfully. It's like, hey, like it is expensive to cover crop too. First of all, you don't have it's not like, oh, you can just cover crop real easy. And I'm sure some people are like, well, you can put those combine seeders on the back of your thing and it'll I've never seen one, and I don't know how effective those are, but it's one of those things, like, there's a huge capital and time investment to even do it in the first place. And I think we look at farming as like, oh, you have to do this right now or else you're going to kill your soil, you're going to do all these things. But reality is like these people have to like make a living. Like that, like if he had to drop everything to cover crop, he wouldn't be able to make any money to actually live to farm another year.
Yeah.
And
It's
the last thing you want happening is for that family farmer to go under and his land to be bought up at auction by either, don't get me wrong, you can have large family farms, or you could have a company like Hertz move in. Hertz is huge in our area, move in, and everyone I know who's dealt with Hertz land management hasn't always loved it. And so there's a lot of things going on that factor into why people don't cover crop and why people don't do things. And it's just that's my biggest frustration with the topic. It's like I think most people are actually for it. It's just people aren't for it being shoved down their throats.
That's right. It can, like it can in certain areas it can be detrimental to the crop that is actually going to make money. And you're right, it is a burden financially to cover crop because not only do you have the labor of the man operating it, you have the cost of the equipment, which it's expensive to run all this stuff, the fuel cost, and the seed cost.
Mm-hmm.
So there's multiple costs associated with it, and it's not something that is a fit everywhere. And I think, is it a good practice? Yes, but can everybody successfully use it? I don't think so. It's just one of them things where there's certain instances, like Kentucky is a perfect fit for it. And there's probably other states as well, but it fits this state very well. And you see a high adoption rate of it here. And it has, really caught fire here in the last 5 years. Even people that weren't cover cropping, previously in the last decade have began to learn
Mm-hmm.
about it and stuff. And it is a learning curve. It's hard to jump into a cover crop system and be successful in it the very first year because there's just different challenges associated with it. You can't use the same practices as you did with your conventional farming that you had prior to the cover crop system.
What do you have to do differently because you cover crop?
Like if you're going to plant corn behind another grass crop, there's a nitrogen offset. Not only is that, I've found that there's a phosphorus offset too. And if you plant into like we love to use rye, um, and if you have a established rye stand in the field and you go plant corn with just a planter without fertility on it, you can't focus your fertility into a band. Well, that deficit that is out there from the nitrogen being trapped by that rye, the corn can't uptake it, and what happens is it begins to kill it. And it will finally grow through it, but not before it hurts the yield potential on the crop. But what we found is we can apply the deficit amount of nitrogen and phosphorus to the plant via the side 2x2, right beside the plant, and you can offset that. And this is another thing, it's going to cost you a little bit more money to do it like that, but you can still maintain around the same yields and have the benefits of your soil erosion benefit out there. In a corn system, corn cover system, to me, you're just trying to save your soil because you're not really gaining much by having the cover crop in the field when the corn comes back into it. It's going to hurt your corn average slightly.
Mm-hmm.
You're not like a field without cover crop is not going to yield exactly the same as a field with cover crop. It's going to be a little bit less. And people are going to say, "Oh, it should yield more," but I found that's not exactly the case. You're gonna lose. Is it a humongous yield loss? Well, it probably could be if you didn't put fertilizer with it. But if you add the fertilizer, you can basically maintain the same yield level, maybe slightly less.
Mm-hmm.
That's
So,
been my experience with
so
it.
how do you justify soil health as a good reason?
I justify it just in the fact that over time your organic matter is going to build up, and it's not something you're going to see overnight. But after 5 or 6 years, your organic matter is higher, and then when you fall into a drought year like this, you know that added organic matter in your soil is going to earn you bushels because more organic matter holds more water, and when you're short water, anything your soil is holding is going to be making you money. So what we found is, we kind of justify the cover crop system well, one, we want this soil to be around for our, like we fully hope that my kids, you know, kids are farming this ground, and we want it to be there for them to farm and not to be eroded. So, we can live with some lower yields, and that's just kind of how we justify it. Is
Hmm.
like that. We're trying to save our soul for our future of our family, and
Hmm.
and if my family's not farming it, the future of whoever is going to farm it, I want to make it better. Or maybe not. It's never going to be better than it was originally, but we want to hold it together as good as we can.
So you're telling me you're a big corporate farm, and you care about your soil health and not just making the most cash as possible off for every acre.
I do. I mean, I know that's hard for people that think we're selfish to understand, but I'm an environmentalist first. I love nature. If you know anything about me, you'll know how much I love, just the creation around us, and I want it to be held together for future generations to enjoy. And if I make less money because of those practices, then so be it. You know, I, I'm not going to lose any sleep over making uh, the best decision I think I can for the soil and the land
Hmm.
and our water too. I mean, ultimately, if our cover crop is scavenging that nitrogen out of the ground and it's not going, that synthetic nitrogen is not going to our water system and going down to the Gulf of Mexico to pollute it, hey, we've made the world a better place.
Hmm.
And we've grown food in the process too.
How many people do you think actually think that way about their farm?
I feel like there's a big percentage of people that think that way. Like most my closest friends that are farmers are very similar to me in the fact that um, they're outdoorsmen. You know, they love they want their family to drink clean water. They don't want to lose their soul to the streams, and they also want to leave this land as they found it for their children. So, I think that most farmers, there's some farmers I think that hold out hope out there that the cover crop system will benefit them yield wise, and I guess it might after this is something that would be realized after a 10-year adoption of it and your organic matter is higher. Um, but I think most people go into it just from the standpoint is they want to protect what their investment in their land, and they just know that once that soil is gone off the ridge and it's in the valley, eventually it's going to make its way to the waterway and then down, through the creek system to the river. So ultimately, they want their farm where it's at and not in the ditch.
Uh huh. Oh man, 100%. I think I talked about this on a couple podcasts ago, but the history of it's called Cattle Kingdom. It's called basically the history of the Wild West and how cowboys settled it all. And a lot of the book talks about Teddy Roosevelt, and Teddy Roosevelt's kind of like known in the ecological community as the guy who started the national parks. He was a major conservationist. Like he did all these things. He was also a massive big game hunter. He had hunted literally all over the entire world, and he loved it and he enjoyed it. And the reason he started all his conservation efforts was because he saw how many animals were being killed out in the Wild West before the U.S. made it out there. And he also was a rancher. No one ever talks about that. Teddy Roosevelt was a rancher. He owned a ranch. His ranch is now like a massive conservation area in the U.S. Like a large, like the guy who helped basically pioneer modern day conservationism was a big hunter and he was a rancher. He worked in agriculture and he hunted animals. And I think we forget that a lot of like, hey, like most conservationists, the sane conservationists typically have a deeper connection to the land than just going to a national park every once in a while and enjoying a hike here and there.
Along with taxpayer money, you know, a lot of the national forest funding and the funding for conservation efforts comes through hunting and fishing licenses. Um, it'll come from some tax money as well, but outdoorsmen fund a lot of the projects for the naturalist here in the United States. So
Mm-hmm.
I think people forget that people that love the outdoors put their money where their mouth is, and they, there's a lot of people here in the United States that just buy private land to manage to be natural. They either install grasslands or forest in it. So
Yeah.
um, there's a huge effort here to preserve and maintain our wild areas,
Yeah.
and I would argue that a lot of those people aren't uh, liberal like Greenpeace people. They're just everyday, common Americans that have a love for the outdoors, and they have an attachment through either farming or hunting or fishing or hiking or whatever their
Hmm.
favorite outdoor activity may be.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I think it's one of those things people forget that a lot is like people who are all like farmers and ranchers are destroying the planet, cows are destroying the planet. It's like, how much of like the US's federal land is still used for open grazing across the US. I mean, I will challenge you to go to any massive national forest in the US, and I bet you're going to find some sort of animal grazing on that national
Yes.
forest. Why? Because not only does the forest need it, but it benefits farmers and ranchers. It helps with overall ecology health. Like it's a giant cycle that's all working together. And I think so many people think farming is opposed to conservation and preserving things the way they are. When in reality, we did kill a lot of bison. That's a fact. Cows make a really great replacement for bison because they are easier to manage, and we're able to actually steward these lands a little easier and better now because we have a bunch of people who live here. I'm sorry, if you've ever been to Yellowstone National Park, bison are very large and dangerous, and they always tell you, hey, don't go get too close to the bison. And every single year, without a doubt, someone gets killed by a bison in Yellowstone.
We,
Why? Because they're super dangerous animals to be around.
we were there this year and sitting there in that big valley in a traffic jam, and there was actually people all. I mean, the bison were like fake charging them and stuff, and these people would like go hide behind a car for a minute, and then they'd be right back out less than 10 yards from a bison. If you know anything about a bison, he spins his tail when he's mad. And these bison are spinning their tail, and these people are walking right out in front of them. So,
Uh huh.
but back to that regenerative grazing or whatever. Yes, we need animals grazing our grasslands because why? Well, they eat the grass and then they return the fertility, in a organic form that's very usable to the plant. So
Mm-hmm.
all these things work together. And God designed them to work like they do, and they actually work. And you know, farmers and ranchers practice exactly what God showed us how to practice through bison
Mm-hmm.
and grasslands. We just replace bison with cattle, and
Exactly.
they don't bust fences down as
There,
bad.
there's a guy on Instagram I'll have to point out, but he was talking about, and I can't remember, we've talked about this in previous podcasts, how we actually have more trees in the country now than we do grasslands, which than we used to, which is actually a bad thing. It was like plant trees, plant trees. It's actually like, hey, like we need more cows on more acres grazing more grass and improving that grassland fertility to if we all believe this climate change thing, I'm just gonna stay out of that debate. um, we need more cows grazing. Like it's not a we need less than that. It's actually a we need more than that, and we need more cows on more places grazing more grass because it's actually a good thing. And I think we all would win because we need more beef because
For sure.
we
Yeah.
have a shrinking cattle herd, which is typically not great for the consumer beef prices, which are already high. Like
That's why you're paying $30 for a T-bone.
yeah, there is a win-win-win scenario when it comes to farming and ranching in the U.S. that we do let sometimes bureaucracy and all the politics bog it down. And like there are that I think I would actually probably argue right now. I bet you our current U.S. climate and ground is probably suffering more because of lack of farming and ranching than it is benefiting from it. Or wait, yeah, I'm saying we need more of it. We actually don't need less of it. We don't need to be taking more acres out of production. We don't need to be taking more cows off of pasture. We actually need to be reinforcing that and figuring out how do we do this in a biodiverse way. Like if you get into all the science of it, which there's a ton of science behind it now, and there's so much research coming out behind it, like there is a situation where the farmer and the rancher and the government and the population. Maybe not the government only wins when they have as much control as possible.
That's right.
But and the environment all benefit.
That's right. There is, and there's some great authors out there and researchers that are proving that, that cycle of crop followed by uh, grass and cow, the whole system put together benefits the land in the long term just because you're getting so much diversity out there,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and you're right. I mean, if you know, eventually, if you let, like when the Indians were living here, we had massive amounts of plains grasslands, and the way they maintained that plains grass was they burnt it, controlled burns, and which benefit, uh, the next crop of grass because trees don't take the plain. Well, once the Indians stopped burning it, and then there's nobody there to manage it because the government maintains it, eventually that grassland goes into trees. And it's not that trees are a bad thing, because trees are a good thing, but there's grasslands for a reason, and those grasslands are massively beneficial to the land and the environment. You don't think about the amount of oxygen. Trees make oxygen. Grass makes lots of oxygen. Corn makes oxygen too. So, or
Hmm.
carbon dioxide. Takes in carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. So, um, we have. Uh, yeah, I don't I mean, I guess I can see why a naturalist would want the land to be natural and nobody manage it, but they should also realize that there's always been somebody here to manage it, whether it was an Indian or a private landowner. At some point, there was somebody probably managing that wild land.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think there's like an excellent case. Like I think more people would have more cows if they weren't so much work and didn't require such a capital investment to actually get the beef process in the market. Um, Based on the way the current U.S. Beef system is, with the way the packers are, it is very hard to be a profitable
It's
cattle farmer anywhere where land is not cheap. You
you,
have to be able to graze thousands upon thousands of acres to make it profitable,
you
or you
know
have to own a feedlot.
the there's and I mean it's one of those arts too. There is a certain there's a certain rancher in the U.S. that can do well with cattle. The bulk majority of people cannot. It's a very honed skill set. Like, I can't go buy a herd of cattle and expect to turn a profit in it. It just would. I would lose my butt on it. And I think that is just generally how it is. There's just very few people that have the ability to successfully turn a profit in the cattle business.
Yep. But I think if more people could, more people would have
Oh,
cows.
there's no doubt. I would love to have. I would love to rotationally graze our cover crops. It would be a great system for us. Is we have the cover crops and they're lush in the spring here, and really, we have good growth on them this fall. We could turn cows out on them, graze them, and then take them to slaughter in the
You,
spring when
you
we
could
go
be
to.
mowing hay right now. I
We,
saw your field of
yeah,
view.
I mean, it is. It's getting after it here in Kentucky. The cover crops are so. Cattle would benefit our system. I just you know like the way the margins are so tight, and uh, I have a rudimentary knowledge of it, but not enough knowledge to be profitable in it. So I can't stick my neck out there and go buy a cattle herd and every fall to graze on my land that is a potentially good grazing spot for them. It just doesn't work. Yeah, so I mean, it's one of them things where, if if there was some different um, scenarios in place where you know cows could get profitable, then I think you'd see a wide adoption of that happening, of places that are already successfully cover cropping and could rotationally graze cows. That would that would be another source of revenue for that farm.
Hmm.
And it should benefit the consumer too, because as you increase the cattle herd and they have more grazable acres, the price of cattle would come down.
Yep. Yeah. But I think, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation for another day. That's someone we should bring someone on from the beef industry to talk about, but talk about how centralized and how there is a ton of lobbying in the beef processing space, which has made it really hard for local butchers to survive. Like, I'm sure you're probably out of that area, but I bet your dad could remember when there was a local butcher in almost every town
Yeah,
where you could take and get your beef processed and you could sell it slice for slice. Now, man, it's pretty hard to find a
it is.
processor to do that.
There's
And it's like,
only a couple in our area now.
yeah. And so it's one of those things where there literally isn't the capacity. There isn't the capacity for direct, like, I think in the ideal world, like in my ideal world, I'd be buying direct from producer beef all the time. But first of all, it's more expensive than the store. Second of all, it's really hard to not, like, you can't buy cut for cut in that. Usually you're buying half a cow, whole cow. Like, I know where we typically get our beef from, the only reason we get it there is because I used to work for the guy and I get a discount, or he just gives it to me in exchange for work,
Yeah,
which is really nice. It's a good that's a good relationship to have. But like, like you're saying, is like, if we had more people able to graze more cows and actually able to get it processed to actually be able to sell to more people, beef prices would actually come down.
they would.
They would
Yeah,
come down, and you would be able to get your beef closer to home and actually probably know the person who gets to grow it. And that would be really cool. That
yep,
would be sweet.
yep.
But that's a nice, pretty world that's fun to imagine. But
Yeah, but I think like what is it? I saw a stat the other day, and it was like I think 85% of the packing industry is owned by maybe 3 companies or something like that.
yep.
So they can basically let all the profit out of the system and glean it all into their business.
Yeah.
Take it away from the cattle producer, and in the end, the only person that benefits from that is the packer, because the cattle farmer or rancher is definitely not going to benefit, and the consumer is not benefiting. But the
Mm-hmm.
packer, they're lining their
And
pockets.
based on the history book I just listened to, I mean, that's been going on for about 100 years
Yeah,
now.
they're
It's nothing new. It's not like, oh man, like big ag has gotten so big. Like it's like, guys, your meat has been controlled this way for 100 years. I mean, that local butcher used to be able to exist, but like Neil was saying, their prices were largely dictated by someone else. Their
yeah,
prices were dictated by someone else, and since then, lobbying has made it so hard to exist as a butcher like that that you can't just go into your small town meat locker and actually pick something up, because you have to meet so many USDA inspections now to meet food grade that it's so hard to actually get those certifications. It's cheaper and more convenient for you to just go buy it at a store where your meat was processed by an H2A worker who was brought over, who doesn't speak any English. And honestly, I live in a town with a Tyson packing plant. They treat their people pretty poorly.
yeah.
Like, it's
I think that's pretty well the most the packers do are using low skilled labor, and they are paying them pretty poorly, and they have a pretty low quality of life.
yeah. So anyways, we'll wrap this podcast up for you now. We will talk another time about the meat industry and the packing industry, because that's something I used to work. I didn't work cattle for long, but I worked it long enough to know that it's a heck of a lot of work for very little money. And so that's something that you as a consumer need to know about, for the sake of, hey, if you do have that extra margin, do start looking for someone to buy your beef from. Because I'm typically for a lot of ag businesses. The big four are one of those. I'm like, I don't really want to buy from you. I don't enjoy buying from you. So, but anything you got to say?
No, I don't know a whole lot about the cattle industry, but I do listen to what the cattlemen say, and um, it it doesn't take me long to pick up on what they're putting down. So appreciate you listening in today. Like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, please share this with your friends. We want the podcast to continue to grow, and so if you guys enjoyed it, please follow, give it a review. The more reviews you give it, the more it's recommended on platforms like Spotify and Apple. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, watch the whole thing. We appreciate you watching the whole of the video, not just 5 minutes of it, because that matters a lot to the algorithm. And so if you don't enjoy listening to us talking, just leave it on play and turn the volume down. Just kidding, don't do that. Please listen to us. There's my little bag for you. That's all. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks.